There is a moment, somewhere near the middle of No Country for Old Men, where Sheriff Bell walks into the motel room where Llewellyn Moss has just died. The lock is punched out. The room is empty. The man he came to save is gone, and Bell stands there alone in the silence of a world that has already moved on without him. He sits with that silence for a moment. Then he leaves, and the film moves on too. Almost nobody talks about that scene. Most people remember No Country as the violent one, the one with the coin toss and the cattle gun, and the killer who cannot be stopped. That memory holds. It also leaves out something quieter underneath. Beneath all the blood and dread, the Coen brothers were building something far sadder. The story of an old man who reached for the world he was raised to protect and could not make it hold still long enough to keep. Welcome to Serial Soul. Let's get started. Section 1. A world that no longer answers to good men. There is a certain kind of story that people settle into without even thinking about it. A wide stretch of dry country. A lawman who has been doing the job long enough to be tired of it. A bag of money that should never have been touched. And a man who touches it anyway. Somewhere out past the edge of town, a person who means real harm. When a film opens on the flat gold light of West Texas at dawn, with an old sheriff speaking softly over a string of empty hills, the shape of what is coming feels familiar before a single thing has actually happened. The mind has met this story before. It believes it already knows how the whole thing will go. A good man will be tested. He will suffer and stumble and come close to losing everything. Then, somewhere in the final stretch, he will stand up straight, do the hard thing, and set the broken world back the way it is supposed to be. No Country for Old Men begins inside that comfortable expectation, and then spends the next 2 hours quietly taking it apart, piece by piece, without ever raising its voice. The film arrived in 2007. Two brothers, Joel and Ethan Coen, wrote it and directed it together, working from a novel that Cormac McCarthy had published 2 years before, in 2005. The story is set in 1980, along the dusty border country of southwest Texas, in a landscape of scrub and heat and long empty roads. The film follows the rough outline of a thriller. A man finds money that does not belong to him. A killer comes looking for it. An aging sheriff tries to get to that man before the killer does. On paper, that is a chase. It has all the parts a chase is supposed to have. What the Coens build out of those parts, though, is something that refuses to behave the way a chase is meant to behave. And the very first minutes of the film are already warning anyone who is paying attention that the usual rules will not apply here. Before any of the violence starts, before the money is found, before the killer even has a face, the film gives us a voice. The voice belongs to Ed Tom Bell, the sheriff of the county, played by Tommy Lee Jones. He speaks slowly, over a series of still, quiet shots of the Texas land at first light. He does not introduce himself in any grand way. He simply starts talking, the way an older man talks when he has been turning the same thoughts over for a long while, and has finally decided to say them out loud. He mentions the lawmen who came before him. His own father was a sheriff, so was his grandfather. He talks about the old-timers who used to run these same counties, and he says that some of those old sheriffs never even carried a gun. He knows how strange that sounds. He says some folks find it hard to believe. There is a gentleness in the way he remembers them, a kind of longing for a time when the work of keeping the peace did not always have to mean being ready to kill. Then the gentleness fades, and Bell tells a darker story. He remembers sending a young man to be executed for murder. The young man had killed a teenage girl. The newspapers, Bell recalls, described it as a crime of passion, as though some sudden heat had taken hold of the boy and made him do something he would never otherwise have done. But the boy himself told Belle the truth, plainly and without any excuse. There had been no passion in it at all. He had been planning to kill someone for as long as he could remember. He said that if they ever let him out, he would do it again. And he said, without fear, that he knew he was going to hell. Belle repeats this not to shock anyone, but because it frightens him in a way he cannot fully explain. He has spent his whole life believing that he understood the people he was up against. Now, he is no longer sure. Something new has come into the world, something he does not have the language for, and a part of him senses that he is not equipped to face it. That is how the film chooses to begin. Not with action, not with a hero riding in, with an old man admitting, quietly, that the world has outgrown him, and that he is afraid of the thing he can feel coming, but cannot yet see. A great many films open with narration, and most of the time the narration exists to fill in facts, to tell the audience where they are and who matters and what is at stake. Belle's voiceover is doing something stranger and sadder. He is not setting up a victory. He is confessing a defeat that has not even happened yet. He is telling anyone listening that the man whose job it is to protect this county is no longer certain he can protect anything. A story that opens on the protector's doubt is a story that has already, very softly, given away its ending. The film does this on purpose, in the calmest voice it can find, and then it moves on as though nothing important has been said. What comes next is the other half of the world Belle is describing. The film cuts to a man being arrested. He is quiet, strange, still. A deputy has him in custody and brings him into the station. And for a moment, everything looks routine, the way 1,000 small-town arrests look routine. The deputy turns his back to make a phone call. And then the man, whose hands are cuffed behind him, rises up off the floor and loops the chain of those handcuffs over the deputy's head and around his throat. What follows is long and ugly and very hard to watch. The two of them crash to the floor together. The deputy kicks and claws and fights for his life with everything he has. His boot heels scrape deep black marks into the tile as he struggles. The cuffs cut into the killer's own wrists until they bleed. And through all of it, the killer's face holds an expression that is almost peaceful, a terrible, focused calm, as though he is not committing a murder so much as completing a small task that simply needed doing. When it is over, he sits back, breathing a little harder, and looks at the marks on the floor with something close to curiosity. This is the audience's introduction to Anton Chigurh, played by Javier Bardem. The film does not announce him. It does not give him a speech. It shows what he is by what he does, and then it lets him stand up and walk out the door. Outside, he finds a man on the open road and pulls him over by using the lights of the stolen patrol car. The driver steps out, polite and a little confused, the way an ordinary person is when stopped by what looks like the law. Chigurh asks him to hold still. He is carrying a strange device, a metal cylinder connected by a hose to a tank of compressed air that he wears slung over his shoulder. He places the end of it against the man's forehead. There is a short, flat hiss of air. The man drops where he stands. The tool Chigurh uses is real, and it is worth understanding what it actually is, because the film chose it with great care. It is called a captive bolt pistol. In the real world, it is not a weapon at all in the way most people think of weapons. It is the device used in slaughterhouses to stun cattle before they are killed. A bolt is driven forward by a burst of air into the animal's skull, and then springs pull the bolt back into the housing so it can be used again. It is built to kill livestock quickly and without ceremony, one animal after another, all day long. Shigur carries it as his weapon of choice, and he uses it on people exactly the way it is meant to be used on cows. He presses it to a human forehead with the same flat attention a worker on a kill floor would bring to the job. The meaning of that choice settles in slowly, and the film helps it along. In the scene right after Shigur kills the driver, the story moves out into the desert, where a different man is crouched in the brush with a hunting rifle, watching a herd of antelope through his scope. He follows one animal in his sights and gets ready to fire. The film places these two images almost back to back, on purpose. A man hunting an animal, and a killer treating a man as an animal. The line between the two is being rubbed out in front of the audience. In the world this film is building, a person is not a special thing, set above the rest of creation and protected by some higher rule. A person is just another body that breathes until something stops it. That idea is poison to the whole notion of a hero. Because a hero is someone whose life is supposed to matter more, whose survival is supposed to mean something. A world that sees a man and a steer as the same kind of meat is a world with no room for that older, grander story. So within the first few minutes, before the plot has truly started, the film has laid down its two foundations. On one side, there is Bel, the old guardian, full of decency and memory and a quiet dread that he is no longer enough. On the other side, there is Shigur, calm and patient and utterly without mercy, killing with the indifference of a slaughterhouse. And the thing to notice is that these two men do not share the screen in these opening scenes. They are kept apart. Bel talks, Shigur acts. The protector describes a darkness he cannot name, and then the darkness simply appears and goes about its work, never even aware that anyone is supposed to stop it. That separation is not an accident, and the rest of the film will honor it in a way that becomes one of the most painful choices the Coens ever made. Then there is the title itself, which is doing a great deal of work before the story has earned a single tear. The phrase, "No Country for Old Men," did not come from McCarthy. He borrowed it from the opening line of a poem by the Irish poet William Butler Yeats, written in the 1920s, called Sailing to Byzantium. The poem begins by saying that the place the speaker is leaving behind is no country for old men, a land so crowded with the young, the living, the lustful, and the busy, that the old have no place left in it. The aged are pushed to the edges of a world that has stopped needing them. McCarthy took that single line and hung it over a story about a Texas sheriff who feels exactly that. The slow horror of a man realizing that the country he gave his life to defend has moved on into something he can no longer hold. The title is not a question, and it is not a tease. It is a verdict, handed down before the first scene. There is no place here for the old kind of man, which is to say, the old kind of good man, the one who used to be able to ride in and make things right. The reason all of this matters so much is that the film is leaning, very deliberately, on everything the audience has been trained to expect. The desert, the hats, the trucks, the lawman, the outlaw, the money, the chase. These are the bones of the Western and the bones of the crime thriller. Two kinds of story that exist almost by definition to produce a hero. The Western gives us the man who tames the frontier. The thriller gives us the man who solves the danger and walks away. Both forms make a quiet promise to anyone who sits down with them. Stay with this, the promise goes, and at the end, someone will master the chaos and restore the order. No Country for Old Men makes that exact promise with its setting and its setup. And then it breaks the promise on purpose. And it breaks it so gently and so completely that many people do not fully realize what has happened to them until the screen has already gone black. That is the argument this whole essay is built to follow. The film has no heroes, and the absence is not a flaw, or an oversight, or a failure of imagination. It is the entire point. Every choice in the story, from who lives and who dies to what the camera shows and what it refuses to show, is bent toward a single end, which is the removal of the figure the audience keeps waiting for. The film keeps offering up men who look like they might be the one. It builds them carefully. It makes them brave or clever or skilled or righteous. And then, one by one, it takes them off the board, often in ways that feel almost insulting to the rules of the genre, until nothing is left standing except an old man at a kitchen table talking about a dream. For now, all of that lies ahead. The opening has done its job. It has shown the guardian and his fear, and the killer and his calm. And it has named the country a place where the old protectors no longer belong. The land is set. The rules are set. What the film does next is the cruelest trick of all, because the very next thing it does is hand the audience a man who looks, in every way that counts, exactly like the hero everyone has been waiting for. He is tough. He is smart. He has survived hard things before. And he is about to make a choice that feels, in the moment, like the choice a hero would make. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the world has been drawn now. A land where the old good men no longer fit, and a calm killer moves through it like weather. Out in that same desert, a hunter is about to find something that will change his life and end it. What he does with it looks, at first, exactly like the start of a hero's story. Section 2. Llewellyn Moss, the hero the film builds. Out past the last paved road, where the brush goes gray and the heat sits on the ground in waves, there is a man crouched low with a rifle. His name is Llewellyn Moss, and at first glance, he is the most ordinary figure the film has shown so far. He is not a lawman. He is not a killer. He is a welder by trade, a working man who lives in a small trailer with his young wife, and on this particular morning, he is out in the desert doing what plenty of men in that part of Texas do for sport and for meat. He is hunting antelope. There is nothing strange about him, nothing that marks him as special. And that plainness is exactly what makes him feel, the moment he appears, like the person the whole story has been waiting to follow. Moss is played by Josh Brolin, and the performance is built out of quiet competence. He moves like someone who knows the land. He reads it. When he takes his shot at one of the antelope and only wounds it, he does not curse or give up. He follows the blood, tracking the herd animal across the rocks with the patience of a man who has done this many times before. The film is teaching the audience something about him in these first minutes, without a word of explanation. He is calm under pressure. He pays attention to small signs that other people would miss. He finishes what he starts. These are the traits of a survivor, and they are also, almost exactly, the traits of the hero in every desert story ever told. The viewer learns to trust him, the way the genre has trained everyone to trust the resourceful loner who knows how to read a trail. While he is following that blood trail, Moss comes over a rise and sees something that does not belong in an empty desert. Below him, scattered across a flat patch of ground, sit several trucks. Around them lie bodies. A dog is dead. The scene is silent and baked in sun, and it is clearly the leftover of something violent that happened hours before. A drug deal between hard men that fell apart into a gunfight where nearly everyone died. Moss comes down to look. He moves through the wreckage carefully, studying it, and the film lets the audience study it alongside him. There are bales of product stacked in the bed of one truck. There is the smell of death that the camera cannot show, but the stillness somehow carries. In one of the trucks, a man is still alive, badly wounded, slumped behind the wheel. He looks at Moss and begs him for water. He says the word over and over in Spanish, a small, desperate plea from a dying man to the only living person in sight. Moss has no water with him. He tells the man he has none. And then he moves on, because something else has caught his attention. Standing among the trucks, Moss does the thing that defines him as a character. He thinks. He looks at the scene and works out a story from the evidence. So many men, so much shooting, and yet someone, surely, walked away from it. There is always, he reasons, a last man standing. A man who survived the gunfight and then had to decide what to do next. A wounded man carrying something valuable would not stay out in the open. He would head for cover, for shade, for the nearest tree he could reach before his strength gave out. Moss scans the land, finds the lonely tree on the rise, and walks straight to it. Under that tree, he finds exactly what his reasoning told him would be there. A dead man, slumped against the trunk, and beside him, a leather case. Moss opens it. Inside, packed tight, is money. A great deal of money. Later it becomes clear the amount is around $2 million. The way this scene is built matters enormously to everything that follows. Moss does not stumble onto the money by luck. He earns it through skill. He reads the situation correctly, predicts where the prize will be, and goes and gets it. And the camera respects every step of that thinking. A lesser film would have had him trip over the case. This film makes him deduce it. The effect on the audience is powerful and quiet. Anyone watching now believes, deep down, that this is a capable man, a man who can handle himself, a man who is smart enough and tough enough to come out the other side of whatever is coming. The film has spent its first scenes warning that the world is merciless, and now it has handed that world a protagonist who looks more than equal to it. The shape of a survival story has clicked into place. A clever man, alone against danger, holding something everyone wants. The genre promises that such a man wins. Moss takes the case and carries it home. That night, he is back in his trailer with Carla Jean, his wife, a soft-spoken young woman who can tell that something is wrong, but does not yet know what. He lies in bed in the dark, and he cannot sleep. The money is in the house. By every rule of self-preservation, the smart move is to keep still, stay quiet, and let the desert keep its secrets. And yet Moss lies there awake, and the thing keeping him awake is not fear, and it is not greed. It is the wounded man. It is the memory of that dying stranger asking for water and being told there was none. After a while, Moss gets up in the dark. He fills a container with water. He tells Carla Jean, when she asks where he is going, that he is fixing to do something dumber than hell, but he is going anyway. And he drives back out into the night, alone, carrying water to a man who, in all likelihood, is already dead. This is the single most important choice Moss makes in the entire film, and it is worth sitting with because of what it reveals and what it costs. The choice is an act of mercy. It is the one moment where Moss does something that has no benefit to himself at all. Going back is pure risk with no reward. The money is already his. The smart, cold, self-interested path is to stay home. Moss goes anyway, because somewhere under the toughness, there is a man who cannot quite live with having left another human being to die of thirst in the dirt. That decency is real, and the film treats it as real. There is no wink, no irony in the moment. A hard man does a soft thing in the dark because his conscience will not let him rest. And it destroys him. When Moss reaches the scene the second time, the wounded man is dead, as expected. But the men who were owed that money have come back too. And they are there in the dark, and they see him. His truck is spotted. A chase begins at once. Moss has to run on foot through the desert at night, hunted by armed men and a dog. And he barely escapes by throwing himself into a river. He loses his truck, which carries his name and address back home. And from that moment forward, the full machinery of the manhunt is turning. The cartel knows who he is. The killer will soon be on his trail. Everything that happens to Moss for the rest of the film, every flight from one motel to the next, every wound, every desperate plan, traces directly back to that one tender impulse to bring water to a dying stranger. The cruelty of this is hard to overstate, and the film delivers it without comment. In an ordinary heroic story, a good deed is the seed of redemption. The hero shows mercy, and that mercy is later repaid, or at least it marks him as the man worthy of victory. Here the logic is turned inside out. Moss's one purely good act is the precise thing that dooms him. His humanity is the leak in his armor. Had he been as cold as Shagur, he would have stayed home, kept the money, and very likely lived. It is his refusal to be that cold that puts the target on his back. A world that punishes mercy this directly is a world that does not reward the qualities that make a hero a hero. The very softness that earns the audience's love is the softness the film uses to begin killing him. There is more to Moss than this one choice, and the film keeps building him up even as it tightens the noose. He is a Vietnam veteran, a man who has already survived a war, which adds weight to the sense that he knows how to endure. Once the chase starts, he proves clever again and again. He finds the small transponder hidden inside the money case, the tracking device that has been letting the killer follow him. And once he understands it, he starts trying to think several moves ahead. He sends Carla Jean away to her mother in Odessa to keep her safe. He buys weapons. He improvises. He treats his own wounds. He behaves, in short, exactly the way a capable action hero behaves. And the film keeps giving him these small victories, these flashes of competence that keep hope alive. Every time he slips a trap, the audience believes a little more strongly that he might actually make it. That belief is the trap the film is setting for the viewer. What Moss represents, underneath the plot, is the American faith that a determined individual can master his fate. He is the self-reliant man, the one who needs no help, who reads the land and outwits his enemies, and provides for his own. That figure sits at the center of the Western, and at the center of a great deal of how a certain kind of American story understands itself. The lone, competent man, facing the wilderness, bending it to his will through grit and skill. Moss is that figure brought into 1980, given a pickup truck instead of a horse, and a hunting rifle instead of a six-shooter, but otherwise unchanged. The film needs the audience to believe in him completely, to invest in him the way generations of viewers have invested in every clever loner before him. Because the film cannot take a hero away from anyone who never believed there was a hero to begin with. First, it must build the belief. Only then can it break it. So the work of this stretch of the film is the careful construction of a man worth following. Skill after skill, the case is made. He can track. He can think. He can fight. He has survived a war. He loves his wife enough to send her out of danger. He is decent enough to risk his life carrying water to a dying man. By any standard the genre has ever used, Llewellyn Moss is the hero of this picture, and the film wants no doubt about it. The investment is total and deliberate, and it is precisely that total investment that the film is preparing to betray. For everything Moss does well, there is a quiet truth running underneath all of it that he never quite grasps. He believes he is the main character of his own story. He believes that being smart and tough and willing is enough, that a man who plays the game well enough will win it. The film knows better. The film has already shown, in its opening minutes, a killer who does not play any game at all, and an old sheriff who senses that the old rules have stopped working. Moss is operating by rules that no longer apply, and he does not know it. He is running a hero's race in a world that has quietly canceled the finish line. How that betrayal lands is the most shocking choice the Coens make, and it is the moment the film stops being a thriller and becomes something colder and stranger. Because the showdown that every part of this setup has promised, the great confrontation between the clever man and the patient killer, the scene the entire genre is built to deliver, is a scene this film has already decided it will never show. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the film has done its careful work and given us a hero in full, skilled and brave and undone by his own decency. A man the audience has every reason to follow to the end. The trouble is that the end, when it comes for him, arrives in a way no thriller is supposed to allow. The promised showdown is about to be taken off the table entirely. Section 3. The death that breaks the rules. Every story that puts two men on a collision course is making a quiet promise about how it will end. Somewhere ahead, the two of them will meet. The clever survivor and the patient killer will finally stand in the same room, and one of them will walk out. Everything in a thriller bends toward that meeting. The chase exists to delay it. The near misses exist to sharpen the hunger for it. By the time No Country for Old Men reaches its final stretch, the film has spent close to 2 hours pulling Llewellyn Moss and Anton Chigurh toward each other, across motels and back roads and border towns. And the audience has been trained, scene by scene, to wait for the moment when the two will face off for the last time. That confrontation is the payoff the whole machine has been built to deliver. It is the scene the genre exists to provide. The film never shows it. Moss spends his last hours at a place called the Desert Sands, a low roadside motel near the border. He has been wounded already in an earlier gun battle with Chigurh, a violent night in another town where the two of them traded fire through the streets and both of them came away bleeding. So the audience knows by now that these men can find each other, that they have already drawn blood, and that the final round is overdue. Moss is waiting at the motel for Carla Jean to arrive. He has the money. He is hurt, but still standing, still planning, still the resourceful man the film built him to be. And in his last scene alive, he is doing something almost relaxed. He walks back toward his room carrying a paper sack, and a woman is sitting by the motel pool in the afternoon sun. She speaks to him. She offers him a beer. They talk for a moment, in the easy, idle way strangers talk by a pool. And there is a faint suggestion of temptation in the air. The sense that Moss, tired and wounded and alone, might sit down for a while. Nothing improper actually happens. The exchange is small and human. And then the film cuts away. The next time the audience sees the desert sands, it is from the outside, and it is through the eyes of Sheriff Bell. Bell has been chasing the same trail, trying to reach Moss before the killers do, hoping to protect him. He drives up to the motel in the fading light. As he approaches, a pickup truck comes tearing out of the lot and speeds away down the road, fishtailing, full of men he cannot make out. Bell pulls in. The motel is too quiet. He gets out of his car and walks toward Moss's room, and the door is open. And there on the ground, near the pool he had been standing beside only minutes before, lies Llewellyn Moss. Dead. Around him, in and near the room, lie other bodies, the gunmen who came for the money. The whole thing is already over. It happened in the gap between two shots of the film, in the space the camera refused to enter. What the audience slowly understands, in the silence of that aftermath, is the part that breaks the rules most completely. Moss was not killed by Chigurh. The men who shot him were the Mexican cartel, the same faction that owned the money in the first place. They are characters the film has barely introduced, men with no names, no faces the audience can hold on to, no presence in the story beyond their function as a threat. The film does not even let them be the villain. They simply find Moss and kill him and drive off. And they are gone before Bell arrives, fleeing in that fishtailing truck. The great showdown, the confrontation between the hero and the man hunting him, the duel the entire film promised, does not merely happen off-screen. It does not happen at all. Chigurh is not even there. The man the audience has feared for 2 hours, the patient killer who has trailed Moss across the whole state, is somewhere else entirely when Moss dies. The protagonist is gunned down by strangers in a scene no one is allowed to watch, while the villain is busy elsewhere. It is worth tracing how the cartel even found him, because the detail is so small and so cruel. Carla Jean's mother, an ailing and complaining woman, is being helped to a car at a bus station, and a friendly stranger offers her assistance. In her careless chatter, she mentions where she and her daughter are headed. She names the motel. The man is one of the cartel's people. That is the leak. The hero of the film is located and killed not because the great killer outsmarted him, but because a sick old woman complained to a helpful stranger about her travel plans. There is no grandeur in it anywhere. There is no contest of wits, no final test of the skills the film spent so long establishing. Moss dies because of an overheard conversation at a bus station, and the film delivers this without a trace of drama, as though it were simply reporting the weather. The way the Coens construct this stretch is one of the boldest choices in modern American film, and the boldness lies entirely in what they withhold. A normal director, handed this story, would film the death. He would build the tension of Moss alone at the motel, cut between Moss and the approaching killers, draw out the dread, and then stage the violence as the climax it is supposed to be. The audience would see the hero fall. There would be music swelling under it, telling everyone how to feel. The death would be made to matter through sheer cinematic weight. The Coens do the opposite of all of that. They cut away before the violence. They place the killing in the blind spot of the story. They show the audience the body, not the dying. And they choose to reveal it all through Bell, a man arriving too late. A man whose face fills the screen in the aftermath with an expression of helpless confusion and grief. The point of view is not the hero's and not the killer's. It belongs to the old guardian who came to help and finds he has missed everything that mattered. The camera lingers on Bell taking in the scene, overwhelmed, out of his depth. And that lingering is the film telling the audience where it stands. Even the death of the main character is something the law arrives too late to witness. There is no score under any of this. The film has carried almost no music from the beginning, and here, at the place where a film would lean hardest on a soundtrack to wring out emotion, there is only the dry quiet of a Texas evening. No swell of strings tells anyone that something important has occurred. The silence treats Moss's death as just another event in an indifferent world, no louder than any other. A man is alive, and then he is not, and the air does not change. Beneath the surface of the scene, the meaning is plain and devastating. The film has spent its second act convincing the audience that Llewellyn Moss is special, that his skill and his nerve set him apart, that he is the one who might beat the odds. And then it kills him exactly the way it killed the nameless men at the drug deal in the desert, exactly the way Shagur killed the driver on the road in the opening minutes. Off to the side, without ceremony, as one more body among bodies. Everything the film built into Moss, the competence, the war he survived, the love for his wife, the decency that made the audience root for him, counts for nothing at the moment of his death. The world does not weigh his life more heavily than the lives around it. He is meat that stopped breathing, the same as the antelope he hunted, the same as the wounded man who begged for water. The species demotion the film hinted at in its first scenes, the erasing of any special line around human life, is completed here in the most personal way possible, by spending it on the one character the audience loved. This is what it means to say the film has no heroes, and Moss is the proof at the center of it. A hero is, among other things, a person whose death is allowed to matter, whose fall is witnessed and mourned and made meaningful by the story around it. The genre keeps that promise so faithfully that audiences forget it is a promise at all. They assume the hero's death will be earned, witnessed, given weight, because in almost every story it is. No Country for Old Men breaks the assumption at the root. It denies Moss the death of a hero because it has decided that this world contains no such thing. The structure of the film, the careful build and the sudden empty drop, is the argument made in pure form. There is no showdown because a showdown is a fantasy in which the good and the capable get their final fair fight. The film does not believe in that fantasy, and so it refuses to stage it. The reaction to this choice, in 2007 and ever since, has been part of the film's legacy. A great many viewers walked out of the theater frustrated, even angry, feeling that they had been cheated of the ending they were owed. The death of Moss off-screen, the absence of the duel, the way the film seemed to lose interest in its own protagonist and drift instead toward an old sheriff's quiet despair, struck some people as a failure of storytelling. Where, they asked, was the payoff? That frustration is itself a kind of evidence. The audience felt the broken promise because the promise was real, because the film had spent so long making it. The discomfort people carried out of the theater was the exact discomfort the Coens were reaching for. The unsettled feeling of a story that will not resolve the way every instinct says it should. Over the years, as people have rewatched the film and sat with it, that frustration has more often turned into recognition. The slow understanding that the missing showdown is not a hole in the film, but the meaning of it. The cruelty of the timing deepens the wound. Bell is not chasing Moss to arrest him. By this point, Bell wants to save him. He has spoken with Carla Jean, made a kind of promise to protect her husband, and he is racing to keep it. He arrives at the motel a few minutes too late, watching the killers escape down the road, close enough to see the truck, but far too late to do anything that matters. The Guardian is present at the scene of the death, and his presence accomplishes nothing. He cannot stop it, cannot avenge it, cannot even understand exactly what happened or who did it. He can only stand in the doorway and look. The film places the lawman at the very edge of the tragedy, and then makes him powerless inside it, which is its own statement about what the old protectors are worth in this new country. Consider what the film has now done across these first 3 sections. It opened by mourning a vanished world and showing a killer who treats people like livestock. It built a hero with great care, gave him skill and nerve and a tender heart, and made the audience love him. And then it killed that hero, off-screen, by strangers, while the villain was elsewhere, with no music and no witness but a sheriff who came too late. 3 movements, and each one removes another possibility of the heroic. The world has no place for the old good man. The new good man is destroyed by his own decency, and the death that should have crowned him as a tragic hero is taken away and handed instead to a quiet, anticlimactic emptiness that refuses to feel like anything at all. What remains after Moss is gone is the question the film now forces into the open. If the man hunting the hero did not even bother to be present for the hero's death, then what exactly is that man? A normal villain wants the kill. A normal villain has a stake in the showdown, a hunger to be the one who ends the protagonist. Chigurh has none of that. He is somewhere else, and Moss dies anyway. And when Chigurh finally comes for the money, he does not seem to care in the slightest that someone else got there first. A figure like that cannot be understood with the usual word for the bad man in a story. He is something stranger and older and far harder to look at directly. And the film is about to make the audience look at him very closely indeed. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the hero is gone, killed in a gap the camera would not enter, by men with no names, while the killer stood somewhere far away. The promised duel was never going to come, because the film does not believe such fair fights exist. And that leaves one cold question waiting in the dark. What kind of man hunts another for 2 hours and does not even need to be there at the end? Section 4. Anton Chigurh, the villain who is not a villain. Stories teach people how to hate the right person. From childhood onward, the villain is one of the first shapes a story hands over. And it is a comforting shape, even when it is frightening. The bad man wants something. He wants money, or power, or revenge, or simply the pleasure of cruelty. And because he wants it, he can be understood. A creature that wants can be predicted, bargained with, outmaneuvered, and finally beaten. Because its desire is a kind of door into it. The hero learns what the villain wants and uses that knowledge to win. This is so deeply built into the way stories work that audiences barely notice it. They expect, when the dangerous man appears, that somewhere inside him there is a reason, and that the reason is the key to defeating him. Anton Chigurh has no door. He moves through No Country for Old Men as the thing pursuing the money, and on the surface that makes him the villain of a chase. But the longer the film stays with him, the clearer it becomes that the ordinary word does not fit. Javier Bardem plays him with a stillness that is hard to describe and harder to shake. His face rarely changes. His voice is soft and even, almost patient. The voice of a man explaining something simple to someone who is having trouble following. He does not rage. He does not gloat. He does not seem to enjoy what he does. And he does not seem to suffer over it either. There is no heat in him at all. The Coens gave him a strange, dark, old-fashioned haircut that seems to belong to no particular decade, and the effect is unsettling in a way that is hard to name. He looks like a man who stepped out of some other time, or out of no time, and the performance underneath that look is built to feel less like a person and more like a presence. The clearest window into what Chigurh is comes from the tool he carries, which the film has already shown in its opening minutes and returns to again and again. The captive bolt pistol is not a gun in the ordinary sense. In the real world, it is a slaughterhouse device, the thing used to stun and kill cattle on the kill floor, one animal after another, all day long, without rest or feeling. A bolt is driven forward by compressed air, and then it retracts so the device can be used on the next animal in line. Shigur uses it on people. He presses the blunt cylinder to a human forehead and releases the air with the same flat attention a slaughterhouse worker brings to his shift. The choice of that exact tool, out of all the weapons a killer might carry, is the single most important clue the film offers about him. And it points in one direction only. To Shigur, the people he kills are livestock. They are not enemies. They are not even really victims in the way the word usually means. They are simply animals to be processed, and he is the man with the device that processes them. The film makes sure this reading lands by placing the cattle gun against a mirror image early on. After Shigur kills the driver on the road with the bolt, the story cuts to Moss in the desert, lining up an antelope in the sights of his hunting rifle. A man killing a person as though it were an animal, and then a man hunting an animal as though it were a routine. The two images press against each other, and the boundary between them dissolves. In the world Shigur belongs to, there is no special category called human that sits protected above the rest of the living. There is only the hunter and the hunted, the slaughterer and the slaughtered, and the line that civilization draws around a human life. The line that says, this one matters more, simply does not exist for him. He has stepped outside it entirely. What this means for the shape of the film is enormous. A villain who wants something is a villain who can be a kind of dark hero, and audiences have always loved that figure. The charming criminal, the elegant schemer, the killer with a code worth admiring. The man so good at being bad that the audience secretly roots for him. Crime stories run on this energy. The dangerous man becomes the most alive thing on screen, and viewers thrill to him even as they fear him. Because underneath the menace, he is recognizably one of them. A human being with appetites turned in a frightening direction. Shigur is built to refuse that pleasure. He offers nothing for the audience to climb inside. He has no charm, no wit aimed at being enjoyed, no appetite that anyone could share. His stillness is a wall. He does not want the things people want. He cannot become the secret hero of his own villainy, because there is no self in there of the kind that heroism, even dark heroism, requires. He does, in his own way, have rules. Shigur operates by a rigid private code, a set of principles he applies to who lives and who dies, and he speaks about those principles with total conviction. But his code is the opposite of a personality. A normal villain's desires make him human. Shigur's principles make him less human, because he uses them to remove himself from the act of killing altogether. He frames his violence as something that is simply happening, the working out of a rule, the arrival of a result that was already determined before he showed up. He tells people, calmly, that the path they walked is what brought them to this moment, as though he were a feature of the landscape they had wandered into, rather than a man choosing to end them. He does not see himself as deciding. He sees himself as carrying out a verdict that was handed down somewhere else, by the world itself, by fate, by the way things were always going to go. That self-understanding, whether it is true or a story he tells himself, drains the last drop of ordinary villainy out of him. A villain takes responsibility for his evil, even relishes it. Shigur hands the responsibility off to the universe and walks through the carnage like a man delivering the mail. This is why the film keeps reaching for words that belong to weather and disease rather than crime when it gestures at what he is. He behaves like a plague, like a storm, like death itself given a body and a haircut and set loose on the highways of Texas. He cannot be reasoned with, because reason assumes a shared set of wants. He cannot be frightened, because fear assumes something to lose. He cannot be stopped by being understood, because there is no hidden motive that, once known, would unlock him. He arrives already complete. The film never shows him learning, growing, changing, or doubting. Whatever made him is long finished by the time the story starts, and the story has no interest in explaining it. He is a fact, the way gravity is a fact, and a person does not defeat a fact. A person only survives it, or does not. The way the Coens film him supports this from every angle. He is often shot as a shape in a doorway, a silhouette, a reflection, a figure glimpsed before he is fully seen. The sound design gives the cattle gun its own awful signature, the soft hiss of air that means a life has just ended without struggle or noise. Bardem keeps his movements slow and deliberate, the economy of someone who never needs to hurry because the outcome is never in doubt. In conversation, he lets long silences sit, watching the other person with a patience that is somehow worse than threat, because threat at least implies the possibility of mercy. There is a famous scene at a gas station where he turns a few minutes of small talk with an old clerk into something that feels like a man's entire life being weighed on a scale. And he does it without ever raising his voice or stating outright what is happening. The craft of the performance and the filmmaking is all aimed at one goal, which is to make a human actor read as something that is not quite human, a principal wearing a man's clothes. There is one detail that shows just how little Shigur is a villain in the personal sense, and it connects directly to the death the film refused to show. When Moss is killed at the desert sands, Shigur is not there. He arrives afterward. And when he does come, he shows no anger, no frustration, no wounded pride that someone else got to Moss first. He simply goes about recovering the money. A real antagonist, a man who had hunted Moss across the state, would care intensely about being the one to finish him. The kill would belong to him. His ego would demand it. Shigur has no such ego. The hunt was never personal, because nothing is personal to him. He was retrieving an object, and the object can be retrieved whether Moss died at his hand or another's. He even kills the men who set the whole hunt in motion, the people who in a sense employed him, walking into an office and ending a businessman who had grown careless, because loyalty and partnership mean nothing against his principles. He serves no master. He belongs to no side. He follows only the cold logic he has decided is above him, and that logic has no room for the small human wants that make a villain a villain. The cultural moment the film arrived in gave this figure an extra charge. The year was 2007, and the country had spent half a decade living with the sense of a new kind of threat in the world, a violence that did not seem to want what older enemies wanted, that could not be deterred or negotiated with, that struck without the familiar logic of greed or conquest. Bell's story in the opening, about the boy who killed without passion and would do it again and felt no fear of hell, is the film naming that exact dread. Shigur is its fullest form. He is the evil that does not make sense in the old categories, the harm that cannot be explained by motive and therefore cannot be guarded against. Whether or not the Coens meant him as a comment on the times, he landed in those times, and audiences recognized in him the shape of a fear they were already carrying. The fear of an enemy you cannot understand and so cannot beat. After the film came out, Shigur became one of the most celebrated screen villains in memory. Bardem won the Academy Award for the performance. The haircut became a punchline and a costume. The character entered the small permanent gallery of movie monsters that everyone seems to know. And in that fame, there is a quiet irony worth marking, because a great deal of the celebration treats Shigur as a cool villain, a stylish killer, the kind of charismatic bad man that crime films have always produced. That reading is exactly the thing the film was built to deny. The popularity smooths him back into the familiar shape the Coens worked so hard to break, turns him into the very figure he was designed not to be. The truth underneath the icon is colder. He is not cool. He is not a man anyone should want to be. He is what death looks like when it stops being a metaphor. An indifferent process that arrives, completes itself, and moves on, caring nothing for the lives it ends or the order it tears apart. Set this beside everything the film has already done, and the larger design comes into focus. The story removed the old hero in its opening, the decent guardian who no longer fits the world. It built a new hero in Moss and then killed him off-screen by strangers, denying his death any heroic weight. And now it withholds the other half of the moral structure as well. There is no true villain here, no human antagonist whose defeat would set the world right. Because Shigur cannot be defeated in the way villains are defeated, and his death, if it came, would mean nothing, since he was never the source of the darkness, but only one of its instruments. A story needs a hero and a villain to carry a moral. The hero embodies the good, the villain the evil, and the clash between them tells the audience what to value and what to fear. No Country for Old Men has quietly emptied both roles. What is left is not a battle between good and evil at all. What is left is people, some decent and some not, moving through a world where a force like Shigur comes and goes as it pleases, and no one, however brave or clever, can do anything to make it stop. That force has a favorite ritual, and it is the purest expression of everything he believes about himself and the world. When Shigur decides whether a person will live, he does not always decide alone. Sometimes he reaches into his pocket, takes out a coin, and lets the air fill with the strange suggestion that the choice is being handed to something larger than either of them. The coin is where his whole philosophy lives. It is where he tells the truth about how he sees the world. And it is where the film makes its deepest argument about whether anyone in this story, hero or otherwise, ever truly had a choice at all. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the film withholds the satisfying villain just as it withheld the hero, giving the audience a killer who is less a man than a fact. Death in a borrowed body that cannot be reasoned with or beaten. He hands his own choices off to something he calls fate, and he keeps a small, bright instrument for doing it. That coin, and what it says about whether anyone here was ever free, is where the story turns next. Section 5. The Coin and the Lie of Choice. The film keeps its largest ideas in its smallest rooms. It does not stage its philosophy in courtrooms or on mountaintops or in long speeches under dramatic light. It hides the whole question of fate and free will inside a dusty gas station out on a forgotten stretch of Texas highway. In a conversation so ordinary that for a while nothing seems to be happening at all. An old man stands behind a counter. A stranger comes in to pay for fuel and buy a few things. They talk about the weather, about the rain that may be coming, about how long the old man has run the place. There is no music, no warning, no sign that this is about to become one of the most frightening scenes ever put on film. The horror grows out of nothing, out of pure small talk. And that is exactly the point the film is making about how death actually arrives in this world. The stranger is Shigur, and the longer the conversation goes, the more wrong it begins to feel. He does not threaten the clerk. He simply will not let the small talk stay small. When the old man makes an idle remark, Shigur repeats it back to him, slowly, turning it over, pressing on it. He asks the man where he was born. He fixes on the detail that the clerk married into ownership of the station, that the place once belonged to the man's father-in-law, and he keeps circling that fact as though it contained something the old man himself had never noticed. The clerk grows uneasy without quite knowing why. He keeps trying to end the exchange, to wrap things up, to send the stranger on his way. And Shigur keeps him there with nothing but stillness and questions. Then Shigur asks him something that makes no sense in the moment. He asks the old man what is the most he has ever lost on a coin toss. The clerk does not understand the question. He says he does not know. And Shigur takes a coin from his pocket, flips it, covers it on the counter, and tells the man to call it. What follows is a few minutes in which an old man's entire life hangs on a word he does not know he is being asked to choose. Shigur speaks about the coin as though it were a traveler. He tells the clerk the year on it, 1958, and explains that the coin has been making its way across 22 years to arrive at this exact counter, on this exact day. The scene is set in 1980, and so the arithmetic is real and quiet and terrible. The coin has been traveling since before the old man knew it existed, through countless hands and pockets and cash drawers. And all that traveling has led to this single moment where it is either heads or tails. He tells the man that the coin getting there was its own kind of journey, and that the man has been putting his whole life up to this point without ever realizing it. He does not say what will happen if the old man calls wrong. He does not have to. The dread in the scene comes precisely from the gap between the killer's calm and the stakes the audience understands and the clerk only half senses. The old man finally calls heads, his voice unsteady. And he is right. Shigur tells him he has won and that he should keep the coin, but not mix it in with the others in his pocket, because if he does, it will just become a coin like any other and lose what it is. Then he leaves. The clerk survives, and he will likely never fully understand that he was, for a few minutes, a dead man waiting on the fall of a quarter. The reason this scene matters so much, beyond its craft, is what it reveals about how Shigur understands his own killing, and through him, how the film understands the whole world. The coin is Shigur's way of not choosing. He frames the toss as if the decision belongs to the universe, to chance, to fate, to the long journey of the coin across 22 years, rather than to him. By his telling, he is not the one deciding whether the old man lives or dies. The coin decides. He is only the instrument that lets the verdict be read. This is the same posture he takes everywhere in the film. The conviction that he is carrying out something already determined, that the people he kills walked their own paths to him, and that he merely completes what was set in motion long before. The coin makes that belief visible. It turns murder into a ritual of fate, a ceremony in which a man pretends that the most personal act imaginable, the taking of a life, is being handled by forces above and beyond him. And yet the coin is also, plainly, a choice. Shigur decides when to flip it. He decides who gets the toss and who does not. He decides the rules of the game and the meaning of the outcome. The fate he bows to is a fate he has built with his own hands, a system he controls completely while pretending to serve it. The film plants this contradiction carefully, and it is one of the deepest things in the story. Shigur's deepest self-deception is the belief that he has no choice, that he is fate's tool, rather than its author. He hands his guilt to the coin, so he will not have to carry it himself. The ritual is not really about the victim at all. It is about letting Shigur kill without ever having to admit that he is the one doing the killing. A later scene will expose this lie completely, and it is worth knowing it is coming because it changes how the coin reads. When Shigur finally offers the toss to a person who refuses to play, who looks at him and tells him plainly that the coin has no say, that the choice is his and only his, he has no good answer. He insists, weakly, that he arrived the same way the coin did, that he too is just following the path laid down for him. But the refusal has already broken something. The whole comfort of the ritual depends on the victim accepting it, on the victim agreeing to pretend along with him that fate is in charge. Strip that agreement away, and what is left is simply a man choosing to kill another person and reaching for a quarter to avoid feeling it. The coin is a lie, Shigur tells himself about choice, and the film knows it is a lie even as it lets him keep telling it. Underneath Shigur's private evasion, though, the film is making a larger and harder suggestion, and this is where the coin connects to the question of heroism that runs through everything. The story keeps returning to the idea that the people inside it have far less control over their fates than they believe. Moss thought his skill would save him. He read the trail, deduced the money, planned his moves, treated survival as a problem that a clever and determined man could solve. He was, in his own way, betting his life on a faith opposite to the clerk's. The clerk's life turned on blind chance, and he lived. Moss's life turned on his own competence, and he died anyway, killed by strangers because a sick woman mentioned a motel name to the wrong, helpful man. The film places these two outcomes side by side and lets the contrast do its quiet work. The man who trusted to skill is dead. The man who was handed to pure chance walked away. In a world like that, the difference between the careful and the careless, the brave and the timid, the deserving and the undeserving, starts to look very thin. This is the heart of why the film can have no heroes. The figure of the hero rests on a single unspoken belief, which is that human will matters, that courage and skill and goodness can bend the course of events, that a determined person facing a hard world can change the outcome through the force of who he is. Remove that belief, and the hero has nothing left to stand on. He can still be brave, he can still be good, but his bravery and goodness no longer guarantee anything, no longer carry the power to set the world right, because the world is not the kind of place that answers to such things. The coin is the film's symbol for that indifferent world. It is the image of a universe where outcomes are decided by chance and by a momentum no person controls, where the long journey of a quarter across 22 years matters more than anything a man might do or be. A story that believes in the coin cannot believe in the hero, because the two beliefs cannot both be true at once. The craft of the gas station scene reinforces every bit of this. The terror is generated entirely from the ordinary, which mirrors the film's whole vision of how death works. There is no dramatic confrontation, no raised weapon, no music to tell the audience that this is the dangerous moment. A man is simply standing at a counter, and the most catastrophic thing that could happen to him is wandering closer with every polite, circling question. And he cannot see it. That is how the film believes danger actually moves through the world. Not announced and underscored, but disguised as the most normal afternoon imaginable, deciding lives in the gaps between pleasantries. Bardem plays the whole scene without ever once letting his calm break. and the calm is the horror, because it tells the audience that to Shigur, this is nothing unusual. Just another reading of the coin. Just another animal brought to the counter and waved through this time. The scene became one of the most famous in modern American film, and the strange, almost tender word Shigur uses for the clerk, friendo, lodged itself in the culture as a kind of grim joke. As with the character himself, the fame tends to smooth the scene into something cooler and more quotable than it actually is. A cool killer playing a cool game. The real thing underneath is far worse. A human being came within a single syllable of being killed for no reason at all, by a man who would have felt nothing either way, and survived only because a coin happened to land one way instead of the other. There was no justice in his survival, and there would have been no justice in his death. There was only the coin. The popularity of the scene as a piece of cinema sometimes hides the bleakness of what it is actually saying about how little a life is worth in this world, and how arbitrary the line between living and dying has become. There is one more turn inside the ritual that deepens it. Shigur tells the clerk not to mix the lucky coin in with his other coins, because then it will just become a coin again. The remark sounds almost mystical, as though the quarter really does carry some special charge. But the truth is the reverse. The coin was always just a coin. It had no power, no destiny, no journey that meant anything. Shigur assigned it all of that. The specialness exists only in his telling, only in the meaning he poured into an ordinary piece of metal to dress up his own choosing as fate. When he warns the old man that the coin will become ordinary if it is mixed with the others, he is, without meaning to, telling the exact truth about his entire philosophy. The fate he serves is a story he laid over the world. Underneath it, there is just the world, and there are just his hands, and there is just the choice he keeps refusing to admit is his. So the coin sits at the center of the film, as its clearest single image of everything that makes heroism impossible here. It shows a world where chance outweighs merit, where the careful man dies and the lucky man lives, where the most important decisions are dressed up as fate to spare the deciders the weight of them. It shows a killer who has talked himself out of his own freedom so completely that he can murder without ever feeling like a murderer. And it sets a trap for one of the film's last and best moments. The moment when someone finally looks at the coin and names it for the dodge that it is. The film has now taken away the hero, taken away the villain in any usable sense, and taken away even the belief that human will can shape a person's fate. What it has not yet fully examined is the man who feels all of this happening and cannot bear it. The one character who still carries the old faith in his bones, who still believes there should be good men who can hold the line, and who is being forced, slowly and painfully, to watch that faith die. That man wears a badge, and he has been arriving too late to every scene that mattered. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the coin lays the film's coldest idea on the counter. A world ruled by chance and inevitability, where a man talks himself out of his own guilt, and skill saves no one. If outcomes turn on the fall of a quarter, the hero's faith that courage can bend events is already lost. And there is one old lawman who still holds that faith, watching it slip away as he reaches every terrible scene a few minutes too late. Section 6. Sheriff Bell, the guardian who arrives too late. There is one figure in American storytelling that people trust almost without thinking, and it is the lawman. The sheriff in the worn hat, the man who knows everyone in the county and has seen everything the desert can do. The steady presence who stands between ordinary folks and the violence at the edges of their lives. He is the keeper of the old order. When trouble comes, he rides toward it. When the story grows dark, his arrival is supposed to mean that someone competent and decent is finally taking charge, and that whatever has gone wrong will, in time, be set right. The Western built this figure and handed him down through 100 years of film. And audiences absorbed him so completely that his presence alone can feel like a promise of safety. Ed Tom Bell is that figure, and the film spends its whole length quietly proving that the promise is empty. Tommy Lee Jones plays him as a man worn smooth by the years, gentle in his speech, dry in his humor, carrying himself with the tiredness of someone who has been doing a hard job for a long time and is beginning to suspect it can no longer be done. Bell comes from a line of lawmen. His father wore the badge before him, and his grandfather before that. And the weight of that inheritance sits on him in a way the film keeps returning to. He believes in the work. He believes that a good man with a badge is supposed to be able to protect the people in his care. And across the entire film, he is never once able to do it. Bell is the sheriff, in name and in heart. And in practice, he is a man who keeps walking into rooms where the terrible thing has already happened, and the people he meant to save are already gone. The pattern starts early and never breaks. Bell follows the trail of the money and the killing across his county, and he is always behind it. He reads the aftermath of the drug deal in the desert after the bodies have cooked in the sun. He pieces together what Moss has done after Moss is already running. And at the desert sands, the place where everything was supposed to come to a head, he arrives just as the killers are speeding away and finds Llewellyn Moss dead on the ground. The man he had begun to think of as someone worth saving, the man whose wife he had promised to help, is a body now. And Bell stands over him, having missed the whole thing by a few minutes. The film keeps placing him at the edge of the tragedy, and then making his presence count for nothing. He is the law, and the law is always too late. The closest Bell ever comes to the heart of the darkness is a scene the film builds with enormous care and then refuses to resolve. And it is one of the most haunting passages in the whole picture. After Moss is dead, Bell goes back to the motel room alone at night. He sees that the lock on the door has been punched out, blown clean through in the strange, quiet way that has become Shigur's signature, the work of the cattle gun on metal instead of flesh. The film cuts to the inside of the dark room, and there is a shot that strongly suggests Shigur is there, behind the door, waiting in the black. The audience sees the lock, the shadow, the sense of a presence in the room. Bell stands outside, his weapon drawn, and the tension is unbearable. Because every instinct says that the two men, the guardian and the thing he cannot name, are about to be separated by nothing but a thin motel door. Bell pushes it open. He enters, and the room is empty. The money is gone. Whatever was or was not in that darkness has slipped away, and the film never tells the audience for certain whether Shigur was truly there or whether Bell simply walked into an empty space that fear had filled. The ambiguity is deliberate, and it is the film refusing the confrontation one last time at the very point where it seemed impossible to avoid. A normal film would have given the audience the meeting. The sheriff and the killer face to face at last, even if the killer escaped. This film will not even grant that. It builds every condition for the encounter and then dissolves it into uncertainty, leaving Bell standing in an empty room, having come as close as he ever will to the man he is chasing, and having touched nothing. The Guardian reaches the very door of the darkness and finds, on the other side, either nothing at all or something that was never going to let itself be caught. Either way, he is alone, and the thing he came for is gone, and he has accomplished exactly nothing. What makes Bel's failure so much heavier than ordinary defeat is that the film lets the audience feel how much he wants to succeed, and how completely he understands that he cannot. This is not a lazy or cowardly lawman. Bel is brave enough. He goes into the dark room. He keeps following the trail. The problem is not his nerve. The problem is that the world has changed into something his courage and his experience are no longer equal to, and he is wise enough to know it. He carries the memory of the boy from his opening story, the young killer who murdered without passion and felt no fear of damnation. And he senses that Shigur is the same kind of new thing, only worse. A force that does not operate by any logic Bel was trained to read. A lawman defeats criminals by understanding them, by predicting them, by being one step ahead. Bel cannot get ahead of something he cannot understand, and so he is forever one step behind, arriving to count the dead. In the middle of his unraveling, Bel goes to see a relative named Ellis, a former lawman himself, now an old man in a wheelchair, living alone in a cluttered, run-down place full of cats. The visit is one of the film's quietest and most important scenes, because it takes Bel's private despair and answers it, though not in the way Bel hopes. Bel has come, in part, to confess. He admits that he feels outmatched, that the world has gotten worse than the one he signed up to protect, that he no longer knows how to do his job. He has been telling himself that the violence around him is something new, a sign that the country has fallen into a darkness that was not there before. Ellis listens, and then he gently takes that comfort away. He tells Bel about a lawman in their own family, from generations back, a man gunned down on his own porch and left to die. The violence of the old days every bit as senseless and cruel as anything Bel is facing now. The country was never safe. The good old days were never as good as memory paints them. And then Ellis says the thing that lands hardest, the line that gathers up the whole film into a single thought. He tells Bel that the change cannot be stopped, that no one can stop what is coming, and that to think otherwise is nothing but vanity. That idea, that no one can stop what is coming, is the door closing on the last version of the hero. The lawman's entire purpose rests on the belief that he can stop things, that his presence and his effort and his will can hold the darkness back, at least within the borders of his county. Ellis, who has lived the life and paid for it with his legs, tells Bel plainly that the belief is a fantasy, that it was always a fantasy, that the lawman never really held the darkness back and only flattered himself that he did. There is no comfort in it for Bel. He came looking for a reason to keep believing in himself and his work, and instead, he is told that the work was never what he thought it was, that the protector was always more helpless than he knew. The scene strips away the last illusion, and it does it not through violence, but through an old man talking quietly to his nephew in a dim, cat-filled room. So Bel retires. He gives up the badge, not in triumph, not after bringing the killer to justice, but in defeat, because he can no longer pretend the job is one he is able to do. The film treats this not as a man failing, but as a kind of honesty, the recognition that the old role has become impossible. In a conversation near the end, Bel admits something even more painful. He says that he always figured, as he got older, that God would somehow come into his life, that some larger meaning or comfort would arrive to make sense of the years of hard work and harder sights. It never came. He does not say this with bitterness. He says it as a man laying down a hope he has finally accepted he will not see fulfilled. The guardian retires into a quiet house and an uncertain peace, having saved no one he set out to save, having caught no one, having recovered nothing, having understood, in the end, only that he did not understand. The legacy of Bell as a character is itself revealing, because many viewers, on first watching, found him frustrating or even pointless. He does so little in the active sense that the film almost seems to lose interest in its own plot to sit with an old man's regrets. People wanted the sheriff to do something, to catch the killer, to matter to the outcome, because that is what the figure of the sheriff is for. The film's refusal to let him matter in the heroic sense struck some as a flaw. But Bell is the true center of the film, and the title belongs to him. He is the old man for whom this is no country. The story is not really about the chase for the money at all. The chase is the engine, but the heart of the thing is Bell's slow, grieving discovery that the world he was born to protect has dissolved underneath him. That the protectors were always weaker than the stories claimed, and that there is no role left for a good man with a badge except to bear witness to what he cannot prevent. Set Bell beside everything the film has already taken away, and the design is nearly complete. The opening mourned the vanished world. Moss showed a new hero, built and then destroyed by his own decency. Shigur stood in for an evil too impersonal to be defeated. The coin revealed a world ruled by chance, where will counts for little. And now Bell, the last figure the genre offers as a candidate for hero, the steady lawman who is supposed to restore the order, is shown to be powerless from the start, his every heroic function quietly cancelled. He cannot protect. He cannot avenge. He cannot solve. He cannot even confront. The Guardian guards nothing. And the film does not present this as Bell's personal failure, some weakness he might have overcome with more courage or more cunning. It presents it as the truth about the Guardian's role in this world, a truth Bell is brave enough and sad enough to face. Bell at least understands what he is up against. That is its own kind of dignity. The dignity of a man who sees the size of the thing and does not lie to himself about his chances. But there is another man in the story who looks at the same darkness and feels no fear at all. A professional who treats Shigur as a job like any other, who walks into the situation with the easy confidence of someone who has handled hard men his whole life and never once doubts that he can handle this one too. He carries himself exactly the way a movie hero is supposed to carry himself. Relaxed, capable, faintly amused by the danger. The film has a particular fate in store for that kind of confidence, and it is swift, and it is merciless. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the last figure the genre offers as a hero, the steady old lawman, is emptied out too, arriving too late to every scene, never once meeting the darkness, retiring beaten rather than victorious. Bell's only dignity is that he sees clearly how badly he is overmatched. Another man in the story sees the same threat and feels nothing but confidence. And the film is about to show exactly what that confidence is worth. Section 7. Carson Wells and the Death of Confidence. There is a particular kind of character that audiences love almost more than the hero himself, and it is the man who is good at the dangerous job. The fixer, the professional, the one who walks into the room where everyone else is afraid and loosens his collar and says, in effect, that he has handled worse than this. He is competent in a way that looks effortless. He carries his skill lightly, with a joke and an easy smile, and his confidence is so complete that it becomes its own form of reassurance. When this man appears in a thriller, the danger seems to shrink, because here, at last, is someone who knows what he is doing. The genre adores him. He is the embodiment of the fantasy that the world can be managed by anyone cool enough and capable enough to manage it. Carson Wells is exactly that man, and the film keeps him alive just long enough to make the audience like him before it kills him in a way so casual it is almost an insult. Woody Harrelson plays Wells with a loose, grinning charm that lands like a relief after so much dread. He wears a good hat and a nice suit. He talks easily, smoothly, the patter of a man who has spent a long career in violent rooms and learned how to keep things light. He is hired by a nervous businessman connected to the missing money, a man who wants the situation cleaned up and who is frightened of the killer loose in it. Wells takes the job without much visible concern. He knows Chigurh. He has dealt with him before, or at least knows what he is. And when the businessman presses him about how dangerous this man really is, Wells does not pretend the danger is small. He acknowledges that Chigurh is something serious, something to be respected. And yet, having said all that, he still believes he can handle it. That is the crucial thing about Wells. He understands the danger intellectually and feels confident about it anyway. His confidence is not ignorance. It is professional pride. The certainty of a man who has survived bad situations his whole life and assumes, naturally, that he will survive this one too. Wells goes looking for Moss and finds him in a hospital across the border, where Moss has been laid up recovering from the wounds of an earlier gun battle with Chigurh. The scene between them is one of the film's clearest looks at the gap between confidence and reality. Wells offers Moss a deal. Hand over the money, and Wells will make the danger go away. Will protect him from the man who is coming. He tries to make Moss understand what he is up against. He tells Moss that Chigurh is not like other men, that he is a different kind of thing entirely. A man with principles that have nothing to do with money or with reason. A man who cannot be bought off, or talked down, or escaped through cleverness. Wells, in other words, sees Chigurh accurately. He describes him better than anyone else in the film. He knows precisely how dangerous the man is. And he still walks into the situation believing his own experience will be enough to carry him through it. Moss, for his part, is too proud to take the deal, certain in his own way that he can outlast the threat. Two confident men, each sure he has the measure of the danger, each wrong. The film could have given Wells a great death, the death the genre owes a character like him. A last stand, a clever trap, a moment of professional brilliance that nearly works before it fails. The cool operator, going down fighting, taking the danger seriously at the end. That is what the archetype earns in almost every other story. What the film gives him instead is the opposite of all that. And the opposite is the point. Wells returns to his hotel, the Eagle Hotel, and climbs the stairs toward his room. At the top, sitting calmly, waiting, is Chigurh, with the shotgun across his knee. There is no struggle. There is no chance for Wells to reach for a weapon or make a play. The professional, the man who knew exactly how dangerous Chigurh was, has walked straight into him without ever seeing it coming, caught as easily as any of the ordinary people Chigurh kills. And here is where Wells's character shows its final, fatal quality. Even now, at gunpoint, with death sitting 3 feet away, Wells stays cool. He keeps talking. He tries to negotiate, the way he has negotiated his whole life. He offers money. He suggests he can get cash from a machine, tries to find the angle, the deal, the way out, even makes a small joke in the face of it. The confidence does not break. It is the deepest thing in him, deeper than fear, and it stays with him right up to the end, because it is the thing that defined how he moved through the world. Chigurh lets him talk, and then, before he kills him, he asks Wells a question that the whole film has been building toward in secret. He asks, in effect, that if the rule Wells followed had led him to this exact moment, sitting at the wrong end of a shotgun in a hotel he should never have come to, then what good was the rule at all? It is a quiet, devastating thing to say. Wells has lived by a code, a professional method, a way of operating that he trusted to keep him alive, the way Moss trusted his skill and Bell trusted his badge. Chigurh points out that the rule, the method, the confidence, has delivered him to his death rather than saving him from it. The skill that Wells believed was his protection turns out to have been the very path that led him here. And then the phone in the room begins to ring, and Chigurh shoots him, mid-moment, almost in the middle of the conversation, with no more ceremony than a man swatting a fly. Wells dies sitting down. The cool professional, the man who handled hard situations for a living, is gone in an instant, and the killer simply picks up the ringing phone and begins talking to the next person on his list. The phone, it turns out, is Moss calling, the other confident man, reaching out at the worst possible moment, and Chigurh answers it over Wells's fresh body and calmly explains to Moss what is going to happen to him. The two confident men are connected by that ringing line, one already dead and one about to be, and Chigurh stands between them, untouched, holding the phone. The image is almost unbearable in what it says. Confidence called confidence, and death answered. The way the film stages Wells's death is the meaning of it. By killing him offhandedly, in the middle of a sentence, without a fight, the film makes its statement about what confidence is worth in this world, which is nothing. Wells did everything right by the standards of his profession. He understood the threat. He respected it. He had the experience and the skill and the nerve. None of it mattered. He died as easily as the man at the gas station might have died, the only difference being that the gas station man got a coin and Wells did not even get that. The film takes the most capable, most self-assured, most genre-shaped character it has and disposes of him in a way that denies him every shred of the heroism his type is built to deliver. There is no last stand. There is no dignity in the manner of it. There is only a man talking, and then a man not talking, and a phone ringing into the silence. What makes this land so hard is that confidence is precisely the quality the genre trains audiences to trust. The cool professional survives because he is cool, because his competence is a kind of armor, because the story rewards the man who keeps his head. No Country for Old Men treats that belief as another comforting lie. Keeping your head does not save you. Knowing the danger does not save you. Being the most capable man in the room does not save you, because the thing you are facing does not care about your capability and was never going to give you the fair contest your skills were built to win. Wells brought a lifetime of professional excellence to a situation that did not reward professional excellence, and he died for the gap between what he believed and what was true. There is a thread running through Wells, Moss, and Bell that the film draws tight in this stretch, and it is the thread of the rule. Each of these men lives by something. Moss lives by his skill and his self-reliance. Bell lives by his badge and the code of the lawman. Wells lives by his professional method, his confidence, his way of handling violent men. Each of them trusts his rule to carry him through. And the film, through Chigurh, asks the same brutal question of all of them. If the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule? Moss's skill brought him to a motel where strangers shot him. Bell's badge brought him to empty rooms and dead men. Wells's confidence brought him to a chair across from a shotgun. The rules did not protect them. The rules delivered them. In a world without heroes, the codes that heroes live by become not shields, but roads. And all the roads lead to the same indifferent end. Wells is a minor character in terms of screen time, but his death is one of the film's most quoted and most remembered moments, precisely because it is so wrong by the rules of storytelling. People remember the line about the rule, the cool man undone at the height of his cool, the phone ringing as he dies. The scene stays with viewers because it violates a promise they did not know they were relying on. The promise that the competent man earns his survival. Stripping that promise away, the film makes Wells's death feel less like a plot event and more like a verdict, a statement about the whole category of person he represents. The fixer cannot fix this. The professional has met something no profession prepares anyone for. The swagger that the genre loves is shown to be the thinnest possible defense against a world that does not play by the genre's rules. So the film has now removed yet another candidate for hero, and it has done it by going after the specific virtue that candidate embodied. With Moss, it took skill and decency. With Bell, it took the steady wisdom of the guardian. With Wells, it took confidence, the easy mastery that makes danger look manageable. One by one, the qualities that different kinds of heroes are made of are offered up and then proven worthless against Shigur, against the coin, against the indifferent machinery of this world. The film is methodical about it, almost patient. It is not enough to remove the hero once. The film removes him in every form the genre knows how to produce, so that by the end there is no version of the heroic left standing. No kind of man the audience can point to and say, there, he was the one who could have set it right. And yet, in all this disqualification, there is one figure still to come who does something none of the men managed. The men brought skill and confidence and codes, and all of it failed because all of it was an attempt to win, to survive, to come out on top of the danger. The next person Shigur confronts brings none of that. She has no weapon, no leverage, no deal to offer, no skill that could save her. And she knows it. She is going to die, and she understands that she is going to die. But faced with Shigur's ritual, his coin, his careful machinery for pretending that fate and not he is the one doing the killing, she does the single thing no one else in the film thinks to do. She refuses to play along. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the coolest, most capable man in the story, the professional who understood the danger perfectly, is killed mid-sentence with no more ceremony than swatting a fly. His confidence exposed as the thinnest of shields. Skill, the badge, and swagger have all been offered up, and all have failed against the same indifferent force. What remains is a woman with no weapon and no leverage at all, who will nonetheless do the one thing none of these men managed, and refuse the killer's terms. Section 8. Carla Jean and the Only Act of Defiance. For most of the film, the story has belonged to men who were trying to win. Moss tried to win with skill and nerve. Wells tried to win with confidence and a deal. Bell tried, in his way, to win by doing the job he had done his whole life. Each of them approached the danger as a thing to be beaten, survived, gotten on top of. And each of them failed, because the danger was never the kind of thing that could be beaten. Off to the side of all this striving, almost forgotten in the noise of the chase, there has been a young woman who never tried to win anything at all, who never wanted the money, never chose the danger, never did a single thing to bring the darkness down on her life. Her name is Carla Jean, and the most important moral moment in the entire film belongs to her. Kelly MacDonald plays her with a soft, worn gentleness, a quietness that is easy to underestimate. Carla Jean is Llewellyn Moss's young wife, and from the beginning, she is the one who pays for choices she did not make. When Moss takes the money, it is her safety he gambles along with his own. When he sends her away to her mother's house in Odessa, she goes, frightened and confused, swept into a story she had no part in starting. She is, for much of the film, the human cost of everyone else's decisions, the person standing in the blast radius of a man's greed and a killer's principles, suffering for it without ever having reached for the thing that started it. She is, in plain terms, an innocent. And the film never lets the audience forget that her presence in this nightmare is something done to her, rather than something she did. By the time the story comes back to her at the end, her life has been emptied out. Moss is dead. Her mother, who had been sick with cancer through the film, has died as well. Carla Jean comes home from her mother's funeral, dressed in mourning, hollowed by grief, with nothing left and no one left. And she walks into her own bedroom to find Shigur sitting there in the dark, waiting for her. The reason he has come is the coldest thing in the film. Shigur is there to kill her, and there is no practical purpose to it whatsoever. The money has already been recovered. Moss is already dead. Killing Carla Jean accomplishes nothing, gains nothing, protects nothing, advances no goal of any kind. He is there only because earlier he gave his word that he would do it. He told Moss that Carla Jean would die, and his principle requires that the thing he said would happen must happen, regardless of whether it serves any end. This is principle stripped down to its most monstrous form: killing for the sake of consistency. Murder as the keeping of a promise made to a dead man about an innocent woman. There is no version of this that makes sense by any human measure of motive. It only makes sense as the working out of Shigur's private code. The same code that lets him believe he is fate's instrument, rather than a man choosing to murder a grieving widow in her own bedroom. Carla Jean is not surprised to see him. She tells him, quietly, that she knew he would come, that she had been expecting this. There is no panic in her, only the exhaustion of someone who has already lost everything and now faces the last thing left to lose. She tells him, plainly, that he does not have to do this. She has no money to offer him, no leverage, no information, no skill that could save her, no deal to strike. She has nothing at all except her voice and her clear sight of what is happening. And she uses both. She tells him there is no need for it, that he has no cause to hurt her. Then Shigur does the thing he does. He reaches into his pocket, takes out his coin, and offers her the toss. He tells her to call it. It is the same ritual from the gas station, the same machinery he uses to dress up his choosing as fate, to make the killing feel like something that is happening to both of them, rather than something he is doing to her. He frames it as a mercy, a chance, a concession. The coin will decide. He is only the instrument. And Carla Jean refuses to call it. This is the moment the whole film has been building toward without anyone realizing it. She looks at him and tells him she will not call the coin. She tells him that the coin has no say in any of this, that the choice does not belong to a piece of metal, that it belongs to him and to him alone. She names his evasion to his face. She strips away the lie that fate is in charge and points at the truth he has spent the entire film hiding from, which is that he is a man, standing in a room, choosing to kill a woman who has done nothing to him. The coin does not decide. He decides. The whole comfortable machinery of his philosophy depends on the victim agreeing to pretend along with him, accepting the toss, treating the outcome as fate's verdict rather than his own. Carla Jean will not pretend. She refuses to grant him the lie. By refusing to call the coin, she forces him to own the murder completely, to do it as himself, with no story to hide behind. For a moment, it disarms him. Chigurh has no ready answer. He insists, weakly, that he arrived the same way the coin did, that he too is only following the path that was laid down for him, falling back on the same evasion she has just exposed. But the refusal has already done its work. The truth has been spoken in the room, and it cannot be unspoken. She has seen through him, and she has told him what she sees, and he cannot make her take it back. Then he kills her. The film does not show it. As with Moss, as with so many of the deaths in this story, the camera stays outside, and the only confirmation comes a moment later, when Chigurh steps out onto the porch and pauses to check the soles of his boots, looking for blood. The smallest, most ordinary gesture, a man checking his shoes, tells the audience that the murder has been done, and the quietness of that confirmation is its own kind of horror. The thing that makes this scene the heart of the film's argument is what Carla Jean's defiance does and does not accomplish. It does not save her. She is just as dead as if she had called the coin and lost. In terms of the outcome, in terms of who lives and who dies, her refusal changes absolutely nothing. And yet, it is the only moment in the entire film where anyone defeats Chigurh on his own ground. The men who faced him brought weapons and skill and confidence and codes, and they were all swept aside, because they were trying to beat him at the game of survival, a game he always wins. Carla Jean does not try to survive. She has no hope of surviving, and she knows it. What she does instead is refuse to let him lie about what he is doing. And on that single point, the point of moral truth, she wins and he loses. He gets her life. She gets the truth. And the film seems to suggest very quietly that the truth was the more important thing, even though it bought her nothing at all. This is also the place where the film makes its most deliberate change from the novel. And the change is everything. In Cormac McCarthy's book, when Chigurh offers Carla Jean the coin, she eventually accepts it. She calls it. She calls it wrong, and she dies. McCarthy's version is bleaker in one way, more true to how most people behave when death is in the room. Grasping at any chance, any sliver of hope, however false. The Coens changed it. In their film, she refuses. They took the one moment where a character could either submit to Chigurh's machinery or reject it, and they chose rejection. That choice is the clearest window into what the film, as opposed to the book, is about. The Coens wanted, at the very bottom of all this darkness, one human being who would look at the lie and name it, who would deny the killer his comfort, even at the cost of her life. They built the film's only act of true heroism out of a woman with nothing, facing certain death, choosing to tell the truth instead of begging. What kind of heroism is this? It is heroism with the power drained out of it. It cannot rescue. It cannot win. It cannot change the outcome by even a single degree. It is reduced to the barest possible act. The act of telling the truth to evil, with no expectation of reward and no hope of survival. And that, the film argues, is the only kind of heroism a world like this one allows. The grand heroism, the kind that defeats the villain and saves the innocent and restores the order, does not exist here, because the world does not permit it. What is left, the only thing left, is the small, powerless, unbreakable dignity of a person who refuses to lie, even as she is being killed. Carla Jean is the closest thing the film has to a hero, and she is a hero precisely because she does the one heroic thing that remains possible, which is to keep her clarity and her honesty intact in the face of a death she cannot prevent. There is a terrible tenderness in how the film treats her. She is given no weapon and no chance, but she is given the last word in the argument, and the film makes sure the audience understands that she was right. The coin has no say. It never did. Chigurh's whole philosophy is a story he tells to avoid the weight of his own choices. And Carla Jean, a grieving young widow with nothing left to lose, is the only person in the film clear-eyed enough and brave enough to call it what it is. Her courage does not look like the courage the genre celebrates. There is no action in it, no skill, no triumph. It looks like a tired woman in mourning clothes, sitting in her bedroom, quietly refusing to play a game she knows she will lose. And it is braver than anything the armed and confident men in the film ever managed. Set her beside all of them, and the film's verdict comes into focus. Moss had skill, and it did not save him. Wells had confidence, and it did not save him. Bell had the badge and the wisdom, and they did not save anyone. Carla Jean had nothing, and nothing did not save her either. But she alone walked out of her confrontation with Chigurh having taken something from him, having denied him the lie that lets him live with himself. The film does not reward her for it. There is no cosmic justice that spares her, no last-minute rescue, no sign that her courage moved the universe even slightly. She dies, off-screen, confirmed by a man checking his boots. The reward for her heroism is exactly nothing, and the film insists on that nothing, because to give her any reward would be to betray everything it has been saying about the kind of world this is. And then, in the cruelest and strangest turn of all, the film shows what happens to Chigurh in the minutes after he leaves her house. The man who has just enforced his iron principle, who has just killed a woman to keep a promise, who believes himself to be the calm instrument of a fate that spares no one, drives away from the murder and is almost immediately struck by something he never saw coming. The embodiment of inevitability meets, on an ordinary street corner, the very thing he has spent the whole film pretending to serve. Pure, blind chance, arriving for him exactly as it arrives for everyone else. How the film stages that moment, and how it stages all the deaths it refuses to show. The silence where music should be, the catharsis it withholds at every turn, is the last piece of the design. The part where the camera itself becomes the instrument of the film's refusal to give anyone a hero. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the only true act of heroism in the film comes from a grieving woman with nothing to bargain with, who refuses the killer's coin and names his evil as his own choice, and who dies anyway for telling the truth. Her courage changes no outcome, and the film insists on that emptiness on purpose. What it does next, moments later, turns the killer's own philosophy against him and reveals how completely the filmmaking itself was built to refuse every hero. Section 9. How the craft refuses the hero. A film is not only a story. It is a set of tools, and those tools are constantly working on the people watching, shaping how they feel without ever announcing themselves. Music tells the audience when to swell with hope and when to brace for grief. The camera tells them where to look and whose face matters. The editing decides what they see and what they are spared. The ending decides whether they leave satisfied or unsettled. In most films, all of these tools point the same direction, toward the hero, toward the payoff, toward the comfort of a story that resolves. They are the machinery by which a film crowns its hero, and audiences feel that crowning even when they cannot name the tools doing it. No Country for Old Men takes every one of those tools and turns it the other way. The refusal of the hero is not only in who lives and who dies. It is built into the craft itself, into every choice the Coens make about sound and image and silence, so that even the language of the film refuses to lie about the world. The clearest single example comes in the minutes right after Chigurh murders Carla Jean, and it is one of the most quietly shocking turns in the film. Chigurh drives away from the house where he has just killed an innocent woman to keep a promise. He has done the thing his principle demanded. He is, in his own mind, the calm instrument of a fate that comes for everyone and spares no one. And then, at an ordinary intersection, on an ordinary street, another car runs a red light and slams into his. The crash is sudden, random, and completely unforeseen. Chigurh is badly hurt. His arm is broken so severely that the bone has pushed through the skin. The man who has spent the entire film as an unstoppable force, who treated other people as livestock to be processed, is suddenly just a body in a wrecked car, bleeding, in shock, mortal. Two boys on bicycles come over to see what happened. Chigurh, dazed and injured, buys a shirt off one of them to fashion a sling, hands them money, and limps away down the street before anyone official arrives. The meaning of that crash is enormous, and the film delivers it without a word of comment. Chigurh has spent the whole story pretending to be fate's servant, claiming that he only carries out what was already determined, that he arrives the same way the coin arrives, that he is not choosing, but obeying. And then the actual thing he claims to serve. Pure blind chance, the genuine randomness of the universe, comes for him exactly as it comes for everyone else. A car runs a light. There is no warning, no logic, no principle behind it. It is the very arbitrariness he has been dressing up as destiny, and it does not care that he is its supposed instrument. The embodiment of inevitability is revealed in an instant to be just as subject to dumb luck as the people he kills. His whole philosophy is exposed as a fiction in the most direct way possible, by the world simply happening to him. And here is the part that matters most, the part that keeps the crash from being the comeuppance a normal film would make it. Chigurh survives. The crash does not kill him. It does not even stop him. It hurts him, humbles him for a moment, and then he gets up and walks away, free, never caught, never punished. The money, in all likelihood, already his. If this were an ordinary story, the random accident would be justice. The universe stepping in at last to strike down the killer the hero could not defeat. The film refuses that reading completely. The crash is not justice. It is indifference. The same blind chance that lets the killer walk away is the same blind chance that killed Moss by accident of a bus station conversation, that spared the gas station clerk on the fall of a coin. The universe is not moral. It does not punish Chigurh because it does not punish anyone. just as it does not reward Carla Jean's courage, because it rewards nothing. The crash is the film's final proof that there is no hand on the scales, no order beneath the chaos, no force that ensures the bad man pays and the good are spared. There is only chance, falling where it falls, on the killer and the innocent alike. That single sequence holds the whole craft of the film in miniature. But the same refusal runs through every formal choice the Coens make. Consider the music, or rather the near total absence of it. The score was written by Carter Burwell, and it is so sparse, so close to silence, so free of melody, that a great many viewers come away convinced the film had no music at all. There are no swelling strings under the tense moments. There is no theme that tells the audience how to feel about Moss or Bell or the danger closing in. The film leans instead on the raw sounds of the world, the wind across the desert, the hum of a motel room, the hiss of the cattle gun, the long silences in which nothing tells anyone what to think. This is a deliberate stripping away of one of cinema's most powerful tools, the tool that manufactures emotion and points it at the hero. Without the music, the audience is left alone with the events, unguided, denied the cues that would normally tell them when to hope and when to grieve. The silence treats every death and every danger with the same flat indifference, refusing to elevate any of it into the stuff of heroism. The off-screen deaths belong to the same design. The film's two most important killings, the death of Moss and the death of Carla Jean, both happen where the camera refuses to go. The audience does not witness either one. With Moss, the film cuts away and reveals the body afterward, through Bell's eyes. With Carla Jean, it stays outside the room and confirms the murder only through the small gesture of Shigur checking his boots. This refusal to show the deaths is not squeamishness. The film is willing to show plenty of violence elsewhere. The withholding is purposeful. Because the witnessed death is one of the ways a story makes a life matter. To watch a character die, to be present for the final moment, is to grant that moment weight, to mark it as significant. By placing the most important deaths off-screen, the film denies them that significance. It treats them the way the world treats them, as events that occur in the gaps, unwitnessed, unmarked, no more cinematically important than any other moment. The hero's death is supposed to be the emotional summit of a story. This film keeps refusing to let anyone reach that summit, because it does not believe the summit exists. Then there is the money, the $2 million that set the entire story in motion. And what the film does with it is its quietest insult to the conventions of the thriller. The money is the thing everyone is chasing, the object every death is spent on, the engine of the whole plot. In a normal thriller, the fate of that money is the payoff. It is recovered in triumph, or destroyed in irony, or returned to its rightful place, and its resolution gives the story its shape. No Country for Old Men simply lets it disappear. Shigur most likely recovers it, though the film never even bothers to show the recovery clearly, leaving it as something the audience must infer rather than something the film stages. The thing that everyone killed and died for never gets the payoff scene. It just slips out of the story, unaccounted for, irrelevant in the end, as though the film were saying that the object of all that striving never mattered at all, that the chase was always pointing at nothing. A story that will not even resolve its own central object is a story that has abandoned the entire promise of payoff that the thriller is built on. The ending pushes the refusal as far as it can go. After Bell finishes speaking, after his last quiet words to his wife at the kitchen table, the film cuts abruptly to black. There is no resolution, no music to send the audience out, No final image of order restored or meaning found. The screen simply goes dark in the middle of a feeling, and the credits begin in silence. The cut is jarring on purpose. Most films build toward a moment of closure, a last beat that releases the tension and tells the audience the story is complete. This film denies that release. It ends the way a life ends, without warning, mid-thought, leaving everything unfinished. The abruptness is the final formal refusal, the camera and the editing conspiring to deny the audience even the small comfort of a graceful ending. There is no graceful ending available, the film insists, because there was never going to be a hero to provide one. Holding all of this together is the photography of Roger Deakins, which gives the film its strange double quality of being beautiful and merciless at once. The Texas landscape is shot in wide, still, gorgeous frames, the light low and golden, the country vast and empty. And that vastness is part of the argument too. The people in these frames are small, dwarfed by the land around them. Isolated figures moving through an indifferent immensity that pays them no attention. The beauty is real, but it is a cold beauty. The beauty of a world that does not care, that will go on being lovely and empty long after every person in the story is dead. The camera does not flatter its characters or grant them the heroic framing that makes a figure loom larger than life. It places them in the landscape as the small, temporary things they are, and lets the emptiness around them speak. Every one of these choices points the same direction, and together they form a single machine, engineered to deny the audience the manufactured hero that cinema usually delivers. The music that would crown a hero is gone. The witnessed deaths that would make lives matter are withheld. The payoff that would resolve the chase never comes. The ending that would release the tension is cut off mid-breath. The framing that would make a figure heroic is refused. The Coens took the full toolkit of filmmaking, the entire apparatus that other films use to lift a protagonist onto the audience's shoulders, and they used it in reverse, to keep anyone from being lifted at all. The craft enforces the philosophy. The film cannot have a hero, and so the filmmaking itself is built to make sure no hero can be smuggled in, through music or framing or a satisfying close. The reaction to all of this, once again, is part of the proof. Audiences left the film unsettled, sometimes angry, feeling that something they were owed had been kept from them. That feeling is the machine working as designed. The discomfort comes from the absence of the cues people did not know they relied on. The swelling music, the witnessed climax, the resolved object, the clean ending. The film withholds them on purpose, and the withholding is felt as a kind of deprivation, because it is one. The Coens are deliberately denying the audience the comfort that cinema usually provides. And they are doing it so that the audience will sit in the same indifference the characters live in, will feel for 2 hours what it is to be inside a world that offers no music, no rescue, no payoff, no graceful end. The frustration is not a side effect. It is the experience the film is trying to create. After all of this refusal, after every tool has been turned against the hero, after the music is gone and the deaths are hidden and the money has vanished and the killer has walked away from a random crash that meant nothing, the film has one thing left to do. It has to land. It has to come to rest somewhere, even a film built entirely on the denial of resolution. And the place it chooses to rest is the smallest, quietest place imaginable. Not a confrontation, not a revelation, not a final act of violence. An old man sitting at a kitchen table in the morning, telling his wife about 2 dreams he had the night before. Everything the film has been building toward, all its grief and all its argument, comes down to that. A retired sheriff, the old man for whom this is no country, trying to put into words a dream about his father riding ahead of him into the cold and the dark, carrying fire. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the film's refusal of the hero turns out to live in its very craft, in the missing music, the deaths it hides, the money that simply vanishes, the random crash that humbles the killer and then lets him walk, and the ending cut off mid-breath. Even the universe inside the film punishes no one and rewards no one. All that is left, after every tool has been turned against the heroic, is an old man at a table, trying to speak a dream about his father carrying fire into the dark. Section 10. The Dream and the Fire. After everything, after the money and the killing and the long chase across the desert, the film does not end on any of the people who carried the plot. It ends on an old man at a kitchen table in the early morning, still in the quiet of a life that has lost its purpose. Bell has retired. The badge is gone. He sits across from his wife with a cup of coffee, and she asks him, gently, how he slept and what he dreamed. And Bell, slowly, in his tired and careful way, tells her about 2 dreams he had the night before, both of them about his father. Then the film is over. That is the ending. No confrontation, no justice, no resolution of any kind. 2 dreams, spoken softly, and then the screen goes dark. The first dream is short and plain. Bell dreamed that he was in town somewhere, and that his father gave him some money, and that he lost it. That is all. He does not dwell on it. It passes in a sentence. But the smallness of it carries weight, because of what the money seems to stand for. His father, the lawman before him, handed something down to Bell, entrusted him with it, and Bell could not hold on to it. In the literal world of the film, Bell failed to protect the people in his care, failed to save Moss, failed to keep his promise to Carla Jean, lost the thing he was meant to guard. The dream takes that failure and shrinks it to its simplest shape. A father gave his son something precious, and the son lost it. What Bell lost was not really money. It was the whole inheritance of the old world, the moral certainty, the faith that a good man could keep the darkness out, the belief that the work he gave his life to actually held the line. His father carried that faith. Bell received it. And somewhere along the way, in a world that turned into something he no longer understood, he let it slip through his fingers. The second dream is the one the whole film has been quietly walking toward, and it is the most beautiful and the saddest thing in the picture. Bell dreamed that he was riding on horseback through a mountain pass, at night, in the snow, in the deep cold and dark. His father was riding with him, and then his father rode on ahead, past him, carrying fire in a horn the way people used to carry fire in the old days to keep a coal alive across a long journey. His father went on ahead into all that darkness and cold, and Bell understood in the dream that his father was going to ride out front and make a fire somewhere in the dark, and that whenever Bell finally got to where he was going, his father would be there waiting, with the fire already burning in all that cold. And then, Bell says, he woke up. That is where the film ends, on a man waking from a dream before he could reach the fire. The dream is doing a great deal, and it gathers up the whole film into a single image. The father, riding ahead with the fire, is the old world. He is the past, the time of the lawmen who did not need guns, the time when the order held and good men could believe their work meant something. The fire he carries is warmth, hope, the promise of a destination. the comfort of an arrival at the end of a hard and cold road. Belle, riding behind, is the present, the old man left over from a vanished world, trying to follow his father into a future where there might still be warmth waiting. The dream offers the possibility of that warmth. The father is going ahead to make the fire. The fire will be there. Somewhere out in the dark, there is light and heat and a place to rest, and the father has gone on to prepare it. But Belle never gets there. He wakes before he reaches the fire. That is the crucial thing, and it is why the dream is sad rather than comforting. The film could have ended with Belle arriving, with the warmth reached, with the promise kept. Instead, it ends with him waking in the cold, the fire still somewhere ahead in the dark, unreached and perhaps unreachable. The man who shot the film, Roger Deakins, has said that Tommy Lee Jones plays the moment not as a man comforted by his dream, but as a man daunted by it. And that reading is right. The dream is not a consolation. It is a longing. It is the picture of a warmth and a meaning that Belle can imagine, that he can almost see, that his father seems to be carrying on ahead of him, and that he himself will never quite reach. He wakes, and the fire is gone, and the world is cold again, and the dream was only a dream. This is why the film ends here, on an old man and not on a hero. And it is the answer to the question the title has been asking from the very first frame. The chase for the money was never what the film was really about. The money, the killing, the manhunt, all of it was the engine, the surface, the thing that filled the screen. The heart of the film was always Belle, the old man for whom this is no country, watching the world he was born to protect dissolve into something he can no longer hold or even understand. The title is his. It was always his. He is the old man, and the country has no place for him anymore. And the story is the slow, grieving record of his coming to know that. So the film has no heroes, and now the full reason is clear. It is not that the Coens simply forgot to include one, or chose darkness for its own sake. The film has no heroes because its true subject is the end of the belief in heroes. It is about a man losing his faith that the world is the kind of place where heroes can exist. Belle spent his whole life inside a story, the story his father handed him, in which good men with badges held back the dark, in which courage and decency were rewarded, in which the order could be kept by those willing to keep it. The film is the chronicle of that story falling apart in his hands. Every death he could not prevent, every room he reached too late, every moment of helplessness before a force he could not name, was another piece of the old faith breaking off and falling away. By the end, he has nothing left of it but a dream, and even the dream he wakes from too soon. What this finally says, beyond the borders of this one film, reaches into something that a great many people carry without ever putting words to it. Most people are raised inside a version of Belle's faith. They are taught, in 1,000 small ways, that the world is fundamentally fair, that effort is rewarded and goodness protected, that there are people whose job it is to keep them safe, that when things go wrong, someone competent and decent will arrive to set them right. It is a comforting faith, and it is mostly a story. The world is older and colder and more indifferent than the story admits. The careful man can die because a stranger overheard a motel name. The brave woman can be murdered for the keeping of a promise made to a dead man. The killer can walk away from the wreck while the innocent stay buried. There is no hand on the scales. The film looks at all of this without flinching and refuses to lie about it. And that refusal is the hardest and most honest thing it does. And yet the film does not end in pure despair. And this is the part that is easy to miss. It ends on the fire. Bell cannot reach it, but he dreams it. The longing for warmth in the dark, the hope that somewhere ahead a father has gone on to build a fire and is waiting, survives even in a man who has lost almost everything else. The faith may be gone, but the longing for it remains. And the film treats that longing tenderly, rather than mocking it. There is something almost unbearably human in an old man dreaming of his father carrying fire into the cold, and waking before he gets there, and telling his wife about it over coffee in the morning. The world gave him no heroes, and no justice, and no rest. It could not take the dream of the fire away from him. That sliver of warmth, unreached but still imagined, is the closest thing to grace the film allows. There is a strange comfort in a film that refuses to comfort, and it is the comfort of being told the truth. Carla Jean, facing her death, refused the lie of the coin and named the truth instead, and there was a dignity in it that nothing else in the film could match. The film does the same thing for everyone watching it. It refuses the lie that the world is fair and that heroes will come, and it offers instead the harder, truer thing, the recognition that the world is indifferent, and that the warmth we long for may always stay somewhere ahead of us in the dark. To be told that truth, plainly and without cruelty, by a film as beautiful and as patient as this one, is its own kind of gift. The honesty is the warmth, the willingness to look at the cold and name it, and to still dream of the fire anyway, is the most that a man like Bell, or a story like this one, can offer. And it turns out to be a great deal. That is why No Country for Old Men has no heroes, and why it never needed one. It was never the story of a man who saves the world. It was the story of an old man learning that the world cannot be saved the way he once believed, and finding, at the very end, that the dream of warmth and the company of those who went before still flickers somewhere out ahead in the dark, even for a man who knows he may never reach them. The fire is out there. The father is waiting. And the film, with enormous gentleness, lets the old man wake, and lets the screen go dark, and lets the longing stand as the last true thing. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.